Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Yusuf Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. First of all, please like this stream, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Give me a few minutes here. I want to share this over on my original channel. My original channel recently crossed 1,000 subscribers, and once a channel crosses 1,000 subscribers, you get what's called a community tab. So just give me 1 second, actually a few, and I am going to share this over there. I am simulcasting to Facebook as well, so people on Facebook are also looking at this. I don't share everything I do on YouTube over on Facebook, but I think this is an important topic, and I think that this one will it has health implications. So I'm sharing this over on Facebook as well. Give me 1 second. Let's see. There are some content creators, when they would start their live streams, they'd sit here doing things beforehand. I didn't know why, but now I know it's to get as many eyeballs as they can. Okay, so let me make sure that's legible. Yep. Okay, so I will close this window out. That window is still open. All right, so with that, I will jump in. I see 6 people. Well, 6 people are watching. Looks like I have a nice connection. So let's get this going. So once again, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Yusuf Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. Fortunately, this channel is back up. I was telling my guests this morning that the channel was taken down about a month ago, and I was able to get it appealed and put back up. So let's see. If an event that ever happens again, hopefully it doesn't, you all can find me here. I have a blogging platform. Well, actually, now I have 2. But that's my original blogging platform where I discuss science topics, among other things. I have that email address right there. That I know that's a mouthful, but I set that up specifically for my YouTubing. I have a Facebook page, and that is my Twitter handle, and that is my Instagram handle. So if this ever goes away, hopefully it doesn't again, there's still ways you can find me, and there are 3 other Big Discussion 76 YouTube channels. I'm trying to think if I remember if that's everything for my opening spiel. Yeah, I think that's everything. I mean, I need to get together a newsletter for all of my activities because I have a lot of activities. Okay, so today's topic is going to be another collaboration with the G6PD Deficiency Taskforce and Foundation. As a brief history of how these collaborations came about and to provide context for what's going to be discussed today, I started this channel just it was about a year and a quarter. So a year and 4 months last year. And when I started this channel, that's when the global pandemic started. And that created basically a gravy train, or what I thought was a gravy train of content at that time. And as you know, my backgrounds are in pharmacology and toxicology. So my interests in what was happening at that time involved drugs that were germane to that discussion. And so I was interested in drugs that could be and would be used to treat what was going on at that time. There was one drug in particular. I won't mention it here. You can go back and look at my catalog for it, but it was pretty controversial and it was in the news along with our former president. And I made several videos on that drug and its analog, and someone called to my attention the fact that that I didn't say anything about G6PD individuals or the G6PD deficient population. So it turns out that there is a population of people who are genetically deficient, or in other words, they don't express high levels of this enzyme, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. So there's a population of people like this of specific origins who lack this particular enzyme. And I'm just going to talk about the biochemistry of this enzyme very generally, because I know there are several non-scientists who will be watching this live and several non-scientists who are watching the playback. But for simplicity, our bodies have antioxidant systems. So in our cells, there are all types of reactions going on. Some of them create what's called reactive intermediates and reactive oxidant species. And what happens is our cells have natural mechanisms for trapping and removing those oxidant species, because those oxidant species can do things like damage enzymes and damage DNA, and which can lead to further disease states. So individuals who lack this enzyme, they lack the ability to basically replenish their pool of glutathione. And glutathione is an antioxidant within cells. Okay. And with my background in pharmacology, that we're always thinking about glutathione because drugs can perturb cellular pathways and do things like create reactive oxidant species, and glutathione is an important antioxidant for when drugs are administered, but also for other processes. Okay, so why does this matter? Okay, so as a pharmacologist, there is a subdiscipline of pharmacology and toxicology called pharmacogenetics, and this relates back to what I just discussed. We're not all genetically the same, and based upon the genes we receive in our from our parents and from our parents' parents, whether we overexpress an enzyme or underexpress an enzyme, that can leave us susceptible to certain disease states depending upon the xenobiotics. Those could be in drugs, they could be in food. We could be susceptible to certain disease states based upon our genetic background. That's illustrated in this slide here. You have the one population right there in the middle, made up of multiple individuals. So you have one group over there on the right. These individuals are being treated with a specific drug. The drug is toxic but beneficial. For the group underneath them, the drug is toxic but not beneficial. If you go over to the left side, that one individual, for that person, the drug is not toxic and it's not beneficial. And for that group at the bottom, the drug is not toxic, but it's beneficial. So the point is that we're all genetically different in terms of a population. And so we're all going to react to xenobiotics and chemicals and external stimuli differently. So in terms of G6PD, and this is all for context so that the audience knows why this is important. Humans are mammals and multicellular organisms, and one of our organ systems is our cardiovascular system. So in other words, we have the the heart and the lungs, and those are important for gas exchange. That's important because each of our cells requires molecular oxygen, particularly in our mitochondria, to generate ATP, which is the most basic food source on the cellular level. So the oxygen has to get to each of those cells in each of the organs of our bodies. And how does that happen? Well, that happens via our red blood cells. Our red blood cells carry oxygen to each of our organ systems and our extremities. And our red blood cells also carry the carbon dioxide from our organs and extremities so that we can exhale it back into the environment. So this is without our red blood cells and our circulatory systems, our bodies basically wouldn't work. And here's an illustration of that. This is one of my favorite pictures. This shows the red blood cells circulating through the body. For individuals with G6PD deficiency, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, they are susceptible to hemolytic anemia. And so what you see over on the right, those are normal red blood cells. Of course, you see white blood cells and platelets as well, because there are multiple constituents of our blood. If you spin it down, you get different cell types. But the individuals who are deficient in G6PD, they're susceptible to hemolytic anemia because of the inability to replenish their glutathione stores. And so what that leads to is hemolytic anemia, which is basically damage to the red blood cells. And that leads to the hallmark, I think etiology is the right word, but that leads to the hallmark symptoms that these individuals experience. So with that, that's a background and that's a context for the discussion we're going to have today. We're going to talk about some of the dietary considerations. We've had numerous collaborations on this before. I think the members of the foundation and the task force will talk about that just briefly. And we have an expert who's going to talk about the dietary considerations. So I'm going to bring them up right now, and we will continue with this discussion. So bring up Brianne Brathwaite, Keely Harris, and Niloufar. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome back. Thanks so much, Anwar, for having us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I know that we were going to get into a nutrition part. However, I know that Keely and Niloufar wanted to talk a little bit briefly about the task force and also the G6PD Foundation. So I'll let them go first, and then we can jump in.
Thanks, Brianne. Keely, do you want to go first?
Hi. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to quickly give you an idea of what our foundation does. I'm Keely Harris, the president and founder of the G6PD Deficiency Foundation. It was brought about 6 years ago, put together because we felt we needed to do something to get the awareness out there about this enzyme deficiency. So our mission really is about getting factual education out to this population, as well as to any kind of medical provider that takes care of anybody who has G6PD deficiency. And we do that in a sense of our website. That is our tool to get out proper, valid information, up-to-date information, and also for people to reach out to us that needs more information than what we are providing. We also have the awareness part. We have events, try to bring that forth. But right now we are concentrating also on screening, and the foundation was actually put together because of newborn screening definitely is needed for G6PD deficiency. A newborn that has this deficiency is very vulnerable, is more vulnerable than an infant that doesn't have it, that could get into a hemolytic crisis, thus become very jaundiced because of the breaking down of the red blood cells. And it is not watched carefully or treated properly and could get brain damage. And that's exactly what happened to my grandson. So with all that energy and so on, the foundation has decided to really push in New York State to get mandated for G6PD deficiency newborn screening. And it has passed in the Assembly part of the government, as well as the senators. So the Senate also passed it. So we're just waiting for the New York governor to sign it. And hopefully we will start the trend throughout United States, maybe throughout the world, and getting this mandate out there so that any newborn that is, any baby that is born will be immediately screened for G6PD deficiency. And prior to discharge, if they're in the hospital, that baby, we will know whether or not that baby has the deficiency. So that's really an update about us, and enough. If you ever want to come and join us and learn more about G6PD deficiency, please go to our website, which is g6pddf.org. That is, we hope to hear from you, and you're going to really enjoy today's discussion. And Brianne, thank you so much. She is also on our board of the G6PD Deficiency Foundation.
Awesome. Thanks, Keely. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Keely, over the last 1 year. And I cannot tell you how thrilled and excited we all were when we heard about the Senate passing the bill for neonatal screening in New York. And like Keely said, is just the start and beginning for what can be done potentially in the US. There are very few countries in the world that screen for G6PD at the neonatal level. I was very lucky. I just found out my son is highly deficient. We just got the quantitative scores done, I think, this week. And I was one of the lucky ones that in the hospital where he was born in India, they did neonatal screening. And he was jaundiced and he was taken care of very well. And he's a very happy, healthy child. And so coming to the task force and what we're doing, we actually last year when COVID started, I, being G6PD deficient myself, got very concerned about the treatment options, Anwar, like you were mentioning, some of the treatment options that may not be suitable for this population. And the bigger concern was, given the scale of the pandemic, most folks are not even aware that they are deficient. This is one of the most common enzyme deficiencies in the world. There are estimated 400 or 500 million people in this world that are G6PD deficient. So think about the United States of America and a population much larger than that. And besides countries like Singapore, there are and pockets of other countries, and maybe pockets of cities in other countries, or regions in other countries like Italy. I know some regions do test for it, some don't. This deficiency is highly prevalent in the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, Asian, and African populations. And most folks are not aware of their deficiency. So when COVID struck, there were two things that were really concerning. One was the treatment options that were relevant for this population and where we could be more adversely impacted by some of the options being meted out for COVID. But also there was some sort of emerging research that indicated that G6PD cells could be more impacted. G6PD deficient cells could be more impacted with COVID. Now, that is still in theory, and we haven't seen any real research, clinical research around it yet. But I started a petition to raise more awareness about this. And through the petition, I was able to meet very, very passionate individuals, scientists, medical doctors, G6PD moderators, and G6PD foundations like Keely's. Keely's foundation is our strength and backbone of the task force. And we all came together and we started looking at ways that we can help this population during the pandemic. Anwar, like you said, we've done 4 sessions with you so far. One was just introducing the topic of G6PD. The second one was talking about the etiology and the research that is done so far. There were 2 members in our task force that have actually published a paper in the Frontier Journal. And they were on your session as well. We did one around treatment options and the medications that we felt were safe or not safe based on research. And of course, we spoke about screening. Keely had spoken about screening, and screening is such an important factor just to be aware of the deficiency, because once you are aware, you're able to manage and address the concerns that you might have around it and be able to live a lifestyle that is extremely healthy as long as you're watching out for the triggers. So I'm very excited. Nutrition is something that I'm always confused about. So I'm so excited that we have Brianne here today, and she can give us some good advice about how to look at nutrition from a G6PD individual's perspective.
Okay, I'm going to queue up the presentation. I'm going to introduce Brianne, who once again is a registered dietary nutritionist. Yes?
Registered dietitian, nutrition.
Dietitian.
But you were really, you were right there.
I was close. I was this
you
close.
were right there.
And since this is a science channel, just for general knowledge and context, that is a whole food science, and that's a whole field all in itself. But essentially, looking at what the molecule does to the person and how dangerous or potentially dangerous a molecule could be, additive, could be a preservative, could be a natural constituent of that food substance. That's a whole industry all in itself. So I'm going to queue up your presentation, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, so how I like to describe being a registered dietitian is it's the study of nutrition for human beings, and even sometimes for pets. There are pet dietitians. Met a couple of them, and I was like, I didn't know this was a thing, but say less. So definitely, it's basically the study of how our macronutrients and micronutrients interact with our bodies, with different conditions, and basically our DNA. My background is in nutrition and genetics and genomics. So I really go to the genetic level to look for different things. However, there are other ways that people would like to go. I really believe in an individualized approach, which means everyone's different. And so not one meal plan will ever look the same for people, especially in the G6PD deficiency population. So I guess we had a little overview about G6PD and kind of what it is doing on a molecular level. So maybe we can skip a couple slides because I think I would just be repeating information we just heard. We can go past that one. I guess we can start here. So I know, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but G6PD is separated into different classes. Also, there are many different variants, as we've heard prior. And a part of why that's so important with nutrition is that we are deficient, but we're not 100% depleted. And so what that means is that we are able to do some of the process, but it's really, it's not the same as someone who is not G6PD deficient. And so in knowing how and what to avoid, it's really important for you to know what class you're in and what your variation is, and getting those quantitative results, because that's going to kind of give you that guide. As you can see, the most severe class is class 1. And that's when you're having hemolytic anemia, regardless of triggers. It's just happening. It's ongoing. Class 2 is having intermittent hemolysis, which means it can just happen intermittently, it's not necessarily due to triggers only. Class 3 is moderate deficiency, where you can have anywhere from 10 to 60% activity of your G6PD enzyme, and that is mainly your hemolysis is caused with triggers only. And as a G6PD deficient person, I am in the class 3, so that is where my lifestyle surrounds around trying to avoid triggers for hemolytic anemia. Class 4 and class 5, you know, class 5 is essentially just anyone who doesn't have G6PD, and class 4 is someone who might have the variant, however, they're not presenting in their daily lives or getting hemolytic anemia. And that happens too. So if we could go to the next slide. So symptoms of G6PD deficiency. So there are a lot. Obviously, there's hemolytic anemia, and some of the things that we see are dark yellow urine, which is actually, you know, the red blood cells leaving our body because they are being broken down so fast. Heavy breathing, enlarged spleen, because that's where a lot of the red blood cells are processed. And then also all of the different things, feeling fatigue, disorientation. Some people will say mind fog. I've definitely experienced mind fog. And not all of these symptoms are going to be the same. And it's important to know that symptoms can be triggered by the use and consumption of certain drugs and foods, but also a combination of all of these things can also create a trigger. And I think it's important to know that not all triggers are equal, and they don't always present the same in our bodies. One of the things that I'll be talking about a little later is how we can actually have a mild hemolytic anemic reaction, and having continuous mild reactions also presents problems for us in the long run, because our bodies aren't physically, you know, running properly. We can go to the next slide. So nutrition. So what do we do with nutrition in terms of all of this? So a diet for G6PD deficient people really should be focusing on, you know, getting rid of free radicals, which are essentially what really damage the red blood cells. And we can do that by eating antioxidants and B9, which is folate, you know, increasing the consumption of whole grains, because there is a high prevalence of impaired fasting glucose and diabetes in people who have G6PD deficiency. You know, vitamins should really try to be consumed from the diet as much as possible, because having concentrated amounts of supplements can sometimes be a trigger. I've seen, for example, vitamin C, I think the daily recommended amount is fine for G6PD, you know, individuals. However, going higher than, you know, 2 grams has been indicated in studies that it's caused triggers or caused hemolytic anemia. So multivitamins are okay. My only thing is that if we are going to take a multivitamin, try to get a whole food multi. Whole food multivitamins generally, if you look at the back of the supplement label, you'll see a little thing that says DV percentage, and that's just your daily value. Anything that's going over like 400%, it's probably getting into a place where it's highly concentrated. Our bodies won't actually be able to process it, so we pee it out, but that does cause some oxidative stress in that process. So it's good to just kind of have as much as you can in terms of vitamins from the diet, from the food. Synergistically, our bodies are definitely more content with that. There are Chinese herbs that are very questionable, and that I've seen indicated in other studies as well. These are a couple that I've seen. Also, henna is not necessarily a Chinese herb, but I did want to put it in there just because we're not really sure how they regulate henna and what it's made from. And there have been also triggers and reactions that have been stated within studies as well. And so, you know, just making sure you're eating fewer refined carbohydrates, and this can really help minimize the risk. I think it's important to know that we are having excess oxidation. And so really being able to combat it with food is really important. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so foods that should be avoided in individuals with G6PD deficiency. I'm sure we have heard a lot of different things, read a lot of different things, experienced a lot of different things. And I think it's important to know that being evidence-based means that we have to follow, where the research is going, but also sometimes the research can be confusing. So one of the things that is said to be something that we have to avoid is soy products. In terms of clinical evidence, there isn't a lot of clinical evidence, and more research is definitely needed, but some people may be affected. Just because it's not written in a journal doesn't mean that it's not happening, and doesn't mean that people don't experience it. Blueberries, kind of along the same lines. People have experienced hemolytic anemia from blueberries. However, it's not, indicated as a high clinical evidence for blueberries. But as I said, more research is needed, and some people may be affected. Fava beans, we've all most likely heard about fava beans. There is high clinical evidence for fava beans, and fava beans should be avoided. The components of the fava beans are the visine and the covavicine. I just wanted to kind of talk about beans in general a little bit. Covavicine and visine are actually only found in fava beans. So that would mean that those who are reacting to legumes are reacting to definitely something that's in legumes because it's in that family, but it's not the visine and the covavicine. And so legumes are yet another thing where there's not a lot of clinical evidence. More research is needed, but people may need to stay away from it because they may be affected. And I think that's the hardest part about kind of breaking down nutrition, because, what clinical evidence might say and what people are experiencing are two different things. And I really would like to see the research catch up to where people are at this time. Other things, tonic water, blued food coloring, artificial ascorbic acid, like I said, high doses of like vitamin C. There has been some clinical evidence for all of those things, and that some people may be affected, and that it's something that we should really have on our radars to stay away from. Something else is iron supplements. We might be in iron overload, so adding iron could also be harmful, and it's important to check your levels for your iron and get clearance from your physician when taking iron supplements, as that could actually cause some more harm as well. We can go to the next slide. So what foods should I focus on, right? That's probably one of the biggest questions. Folate-rich foods. Why? Because folate is a really important vitamin in terms of protecting the red blood cells. Glutathione-rich foods. We are hearing that with G6PD deficiency, we're not able to store glutathione, or also not able to really create it in the way that we need it. So being able to have glutathione-rich foods is something that we should have daily. Antioxidant-rich foods, that's kind of addressing what happens because we don't have the glutathione. We have a lot of oxidative stress. Therefore, we want to have antioxidants to combat that. Things like broccoli, spinach, carrots. There's a long list here, but these are all foods that are really good for us. Actually, spinach tends to be in all three categories. I don't know if anyone's noticed. So, when your parents are like, eat your greens, like, you should probably eat your greens. I didn't want to listen, but clearly now I'm like, Mom, you were right. But yeah, certainly there are a lot of different foods that can provide us with, the reduction of oxidative stress. And that's how we can combat this, as there are no cures or medications at this time. We can go to the next slide. So I've also had this happen where it's like I've had food that is said to be avoided, but then nothing happened. So please note that in many cases, reactions go unnoticed. They are mild and they present as brain fog, feeling run down, tired, low energy. And this happening for a prolonged period of time can cause a crisis. It also can just be bad for the body in general because it's not being able to mitigate the oxidative stress and it's just kind of building. One trigger alone may not cause a reaction. However, multiple oxidative factors can cause hemolytic anemia. So that means if you're already feeling run down, and then maybe you have something on the list of things that could be triggering that maybe you once had and nothing had happened, but you do end up having hemolytic anemia, we really need to be mindful about where we are, and if we are feeling run down, if we're sick and we're taking a medicine that is contraindicated, then obviously there's going to be a higher risk for hemolytic anemia because we're piling on top of that oxidative stress. So it's really important to kind of check in with where we are and how we're feeling. A big thing is that not every G6PD individual will have the same trigger. Class and type of the variant play a large role in whether someone's going to experience a crisis. So, someone who is class 3 but has 60% of the enzyme functionality versus someone who has 15%, that's going to look drastically different in what the threshold is for oxidative stress for that person. And so it's really important to kind of also go and get tests done to see where you are, what class you are, what variant you have, because that knowledge is invaluable. Another thing is we're deficient, not depleted. So we do have a little bit of the enzyme, but it's just really important to know that in that case, there are certain things that we may have to avoid more than others, but it's not a complete, you may never look or have this or taste this or see this ever again. So I think we can go to the next slide. Oh, well, I know that was very short, but I'm sure there are a lot of questions. And I guess we can have that discussion all together because I'm sure they're not all going to be nutrition questions.
Okay. So if I recall correctly, if there are questions in the chat, we're not going to be able to get to everything today. So, Brian, those questions should go to the task force or the foundation.
So if there are questions in the chat, those questions should go to my email at the foundation so that I can reply to them. It's probably best if we could share my email. Is that possible?
I could type it in, or if there's a URL we can go to the site.
Yeah, I can actually say it's B Brathwaite, so BBRATHWAITE at G6PDDF.org. And I know that, I don't know if there's a way to put that in the chat for the guests to see.
There it is.
Perfect.
And all this is just for completeness, just to make sure your question gets answered thoroughly and correctly. And there's a lot that's that this isn't talked about a lot in mainstream. I want to say the media, but this is just for completeness. Okay, there it is. Okay.
Brian, I have, sorry.
And Keely?
Yeah, Brian, I have a lot of questions, just being deficient myself. So one of the interesting things is in terms of blueberries, what I was given to understand is that the reason blueberries were off the list is because of potential blue coloring that was added to the blueberries. Mm-hmm. And as you said, blue coloring is not necessarily good for us. Do you see that as the cause for sort of staying away from blueberries? Because otherwise blueberries is an excellent antioxidant and we need antioxidants.
I'm so happy you brought that up. So yeah, I think a lot of this is kind of like weighing the pros and cons, correct? Because while we are in this state of having oxidative stress, then it's like blueberries would be great, correct? I think it's important to know that the best and the safest way, or to mitigate that response to blueberries, is to try to go organic with your blueberries at all times if you can, or getting it from a local farm where you know that it's, you know, definitely just straight grassroots. Blueberries were planted, they were watered, they didn't use any pesticides. And I think that's really important because that kind of takes some of the guesswork out. It's not saying that no organic blueberry anywhere doesn't have blue dye, but there are definitely stipulations in place for something to even have an organic distinction. And a lot of that time is it needs to be as closest to its original form as possible. And if you're able to find a local farm, that's also something where it's like they don't necessarily need to, you know, put in blue dye so that it's preserved over a longer period of time. So it comes back to really trying to source your food from good, clean sources.
Thanks for that. And that's actually exactly what we follow at home. We try and go organic as much as possible just to avoid all the preservatives and the chemicals that could potentially be harmful. Another question that I got from the group earlier as well was around oranges and fresh tangerines. Again, like you said, most of our vitamins need to come from natural sources. And so I gorge on oranges. But I think given that ascorbic acid has been shown to be a potential trigger, and the fact that vitamin C is one of the high levels of vitamin C, has been indicated to be a trigger. How do you think of oranges and fresh tangerines?
So I want to be very clear about this one. So the vitamin C that you're getting from your fresh oranges and tangerine, like those are great. You know, you're not going anywhere over, I would want to say like 60 milligrams, right? What we're seeing when people are having these reactions to vitamin C are like 80 grams, like 2 to 80 grams. And that is a humongous amount of vitamin C. And it's also not being processed the same way in our body synergistically. Having vitamin C from a whole fruit it should be safe for G6PD population 100%. We need vitamin C. We can't just like omit it. We would end up getting scurvy. They've done a lot of work around trying to get us not to have that by fortifying it and things. So I think it's really important to know that an orange and a tangerine is okay. You know, taking anything over 2 grams of vitamin C is questionable. And I think you would have to get it intravenously to get it anywhere close to like 80 grams. So I think that's like the distinction. Vitamin C from food and from whole fruits are very different from ascorbic acid from a supplement, for sure.
Right. Thanks so much. I think someone asked about quinine in the tonic water. Is that what causes the tonic water to be sort of unsafe?
Yes, so it is contraindicated for G6PD individuals, and so that is 100%. What is the cost with tonic water? I have been doing seltzer water. It has definitely replaced tonic water. I don't even remember what that is anymore. But there are other options in terms of what you can use. But yeah, that's kind of the mindset behind it. And also I will share, like, being a G6PD deficient person, when I did have tonic water, I immediately knew something was not right. Like I just felt like I was like, oh, this is not a good feeling, maybe about an hour or 2 later. So I think it's also about like knowing your body and really trusting your body. I found that there are some foods that are indicated that I have had, and I have had a feeling about whether it's like having mind fog or different things to that nature, like feeling run down. And so I know that when I do have antioxidants, I can physically feel the change. Like I'm like, okay, I'm feeling better. So I think it's like really important to just start to learn how to listen to your body, which I hope Yes, that's actually really important. Someone just said spinach is life. I'm seeing all these things pop up. Spinach is life. But yeah, it's really important to know your body and to really be more cognizant of how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome.
I
And
think,
just on that note, sorry, go ahead.
I think this is a good question for you, Niloufar and Keely.
How do we find out what class we are? Keely, you want to take that?
Sure. From my understanding, these classifications were done by the World Health Organization. And this is all based on the quantity of how deficient they are quantitatively. So in other words, there is a range. Class 1 is really specifically that they are chronically, they chronically are hemolytic. They hemolyze for whatever reason, all different reasons, but they're known to do a lot, to hemolyze continuously. But class 2, class 3, it's really quantitatively how deficient you are. And so it's a range. Off the top of my head, I don't have that. I know it's on the website exactly what that would be. But once you find out quantitatively how deficient you are, if you are G6PD deficient, they classify you then. And that's when you place. And there seems to be certain variations, such as the Mediterranean variation, we'll say. Most of the time, they would be in that class 2 category. And I guess there's an African variation. Most of the time, that is in class 3. But from what I found out most recently, I think 2019, just before COVID was going to, before COVID hit United States, or the world, I should say, the WHO was considering to reclassify. They were not happy with that classification because there were still people could be class 2. That was a different variation that is usually class 3. So it's not now that they know a lot more about G6PD deficiency, they were going to reclassify. So they have yet to do it because of COVID. I understand that. So they never never got back together to discuss this and make a whole new classification. So I'm still waiting for it. So for now, that's what we have. And so classification is important to know because that kind of tells you how you're going to respond because of your quantitative amount of G6PD deficiency, except for class 1. It's kind of interesting. I think that can be happening with different variants that are out there. It's not all one variant that causes that class 1. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, so I just want to tell everyone, for those who are just joining, we presented, Brianne provided a slide earlier that lists out what the different classes are. So if you missed it, you can watch on the playback what exactly those are. Niloufar?
No, I wanted to add my own personal experience. So I am a class 3 because I'm not as deficient, and I most likely have got a better X chromosome from my mom and a deficient chromosome from my dad. But we just did the quantitative test for my son. We always knew he was deficient because he was tested at birth. But we did the quantitative recently, and we found that he is severely deficient. So he is less than 10% for sure. Now, I don't know if he's still class 1 or class 2. And Keely, maybe I should touch base with you later after this to understand that better. Like, how do I know? Because otherwise his hemoglobin counts and everything else look very good. It's just that his G6PD numbers looked really, really low. So it could be that, especially with women, given that you could be a carrier and you have 2 X chromosomes, and since this is an X chromosome-linked disorder, you could be in a better place. So within the family as well, you could potentially see a difference in terms of quantitative scores. And that's what I've seen myself. But I think the quantitative test was the way to go. I decided recently that I have to get to know what is the level of enzyme activity within each individual in the family. That was
Yes, the way the WHO used to do it was, if you have the Mediterranean variant, then you are class 2. If you have the African variant, you are class 3. And we are finding that is not true. So that's why they're going to be redoing this. So right now, classification should be really based on your quantitative results. So there may be more classes coming up. In other words, this may even be broken down even more than just 4 or 5 classifications. We'll see. There's always room for change in science. So right now, that's what we have.
very true. So,
Okay.
Brian,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. I just wanted to. I kind of stopped us for this question. I thought it was an important question, but Niloufar, you had more questions about the dietary.
Yeah, I do actually. So, Brian, I think I did put this up on my Facebook group earlier, a few weeks back, and I've got quite a lot of questions. One of the questions was around, now, the way I understand it, and I might be wrong, right? I'm not really a medical, just as a disclaimer, I am a management grad and I work in a fintech as a strategy and transformation director. I do not have a background in medicine and science. I'm a G6PD individual and passionate about the topic. So, but I do understand that G6PD individuals are unable to process carbs and fats as effectively as other individuals. One, I want to know if that statement I made is right. And two is, if that is the case, do we have to look at a different composition in our diet to help sort of mitigate that?
Okay. So if we look through, so the whole pathway, and from top to bottom, the whole goal of the pathway where G6PD is even a part of it is to turn glucose into energy. And so actually the glucose pentose shunt pathway is actually kind of connected to the whole entire thing. However, we can break down carbohydrates and transfer it into energy. That's something that we can do as glucose 6-phosphate deficient people. However, there is a part of the pentose shunt that, in the effect that portion of our pathway is somewhat disturbed, can also turn glucose into energy. We, in that sense, have a hard time doing that, as we don't have the G6PD enzyme in excess to be able to go through that whole process for end products. So can we, digest carbs? Yes. Are our systems as efficient as everyday people? It depends on which place in the pathway we are processing the carbohydrates. I think what's really important is the type of carbohydrates. It is shown, many studies have shown that G6PD patients have a really impaired process for glucose if they do have diabetes, more so than just somebody who would have diabetes. And so what that means is, and actually I think the mechanism behind it, they're still trying to figure it out. There have been studies that say it's because of nitric oxide impairment, and how that kind of has to do with more of the oxidative stress impairment as well. However, I would say the only change that you would have to make is just having, anti-inflammatory fats, that meaning unsaturated fats, things like olive oil, different things to that extent. And then also making sure that you're having whole grains. So your oatmeal, your brown rice. And I think that the recommendations right now for healthy people is that making half of your plate whole grains. I think that's a good thing. If you have white rice, your body will be able to handle it. But it just is more efficient in terms of trying to kind of mitigate that larger risk for diabetes that we do have, in trying to make sure we're doing whole grains and things like oats, brown rice, to that nature, quinoa, all of those things are really important.
Makes sense. So in terms of just picking up the right fats and the right carbs should be good enough for us, but not changing our diet to accommodate more protein or accommodate less fat. That's
Yeah,
not really
I
necessary.
think there hasn't been research on the profile of exactly how that would look. And I also don't necessarily think, based on research, and there isn't a lot of it, I haven't really seen that has been proven. So I would say for right now, it's really doing the little things, really trying to be conscious of what kind of carbs, kind of staying away with the, staying away from, refined carbohydrates, if you would say. So like the different ones that are just very, very, very high glycemic. That's definitely something that you would want to do.
Interesting. I saw that note about quinine again. A quick question. I believe red wine has quinine as well. Is that right? And therefore, should I be staying away from red wine because that's the only alcoholic drink I drink?
I mean, wine has sulfates. So
it's not quinine, it's sulfates. Is it in the wine?
That's in the sulfates.
Okay.
I've never seen quinine in red wine. I don't know what kind of red wine has quinine in it, but if it's there, I would say don't do it. But yeah, it is sulfates. And I think this comes down to different sugars for different people. We're all not the same. And also, like, our bodies obviously will react. Even if it is a low grade sugar, it will react. And so, like, being cognizant that there is a reaction is something where you can say, you know what, I don't think I feel, normal after having red wine. And whatever normal means for you. I think we all kind of know when we're feeling good versus when we're feeling or, not very great at all. So yeah, I would say personally, I'm not sure about the manufacturing of certain things anymore because over time they've definitely changed. And as this research comes out, we know we're looking a little bit back in time. So there is a possibility that there are some things that no longer contain certain sugars that we're talking about at this time as well.
Absolutely. I have another question that came up is in terms of the trigger food, like if I eat food, should I be expecting that I'd see fatigue, tiredness, or even a low level of hemolysis? Would I expect it the same day, the next day, after 48 hours? Like, how should we be thinking about timing to try and understand which foods work for us and don't work for us?
So I think that's a very individual question. I think everyone's body processes things very differently, and the time for that is very different. I guess I could share how I found out I had G6PD. I was a little 5-year-old Brie, and my mom used to keep mints in her pocket in the closet. She also used to keep mothballs in the closet. And one day I thought a mint had just fell out into the closet. And so I put it in my mouth. Didn't taste great, spit it back out. But then 3 days later, I was like, Mom, this doesn't look right. And my pee was like completely dark red. I had to go to the hospital. It took several days for them to be like, we don't know what's happening with her. I was internal, like red blood cells were like basically, breaking down for a good 5 days. And so that's one of the huge triggers, right? Like mothballs, like that's huge. So it took my body 3 days to like take that little tiny 3 seconds of having a mothball to process it. Whereas somebody could eat a blueberry and the next day be there with a blue dye and be there for, a certain amount of time. So it's really hard to say when you would, but I mean, eventually, like, you'll know. Like I clearly as a child, I don't think I could really articulate how I felt any different because I was so young, but there were definitely physical factors that my mom was like, okay, this isn't okay. You need to go to the hospital. So I don't know if there's a clear answer for that. I guess it would just it's as long as it takes your body to get over the oxidative stress, right? That's the first part. And then the second part is it's as long as it takes for your body to process it to get to the point where they need to use the G6PD enzyme, which is not enough at that point.
Makes sense. Another question, Brian, and I'm sure maybe if you want to go back and send us some more formal feedback as well. But I saw someone asking about supplements. I've seen questions about supplements as well, like what is it that we can take to help us. NAC comes up quite a bit in the conversations I have with folks. Glutathione comes up as a supplement. What would your advice be around besides, like, I prefer natural diets, right? So I'm very much to get as much as my protein, or as much as my nutrients from natural diets, but I do know that there are supplements available and sometimes they help. So
Yeah.
how do you think of it?
So I think it's really important with supplements to kind of do the research, but also understand that like none of this is tested or really looked into by the FDA. Unless it's being prescribed by your doctor, it's really, most supplements are just kind of like, this is the intended use, this is what we would like it to do, have it at your own risk. Personally, and I can say this personally, not that this is something that everyone needs to do, but I do use some supplements. One of them, which I know has worked for me, is oil of oregano. I don't know if anyone's heard of oil of oregano, but it is a very like big antioxidant. And that would be more of like a natural supplement. And that definitely, I do take doses of that. And I have, or I believe it helps me. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and get oil of oregano, because this is just more of a personal testimonial about something rather than, this is in the literature. But I think it's really important to know. I'm still doing a lot of research in taking supplement form reduced glutathione and whether or not that's good over a prolonged period of time, whether or not that helps. I think a lot of this is really needs the research, and I hope that that's like something that I can do in the future, like really have tabs and a place in that research, because I do think that that would be a really massive shift in how we look at triggers and oxidative stress for G6PD D individuals. But as of now, I would say supplements are kind of up to your own judgment call and a personal choice that you'll have to make.
Any comments on NAC? Just like you mentioned, glutathione. I forget the full form of NAC, but I do see a lot of folks that are deficient talk about it. I personally don't use it, but I was just wondering if there's any thought around it.
Yeah, I think that, as I said, like the thing with supplements is that they don't ever really react the exact same way as the actual synergistic component of our body works.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure if that works. I haven't researched that, and I'd like to say that I do not know at this time. However, I know that I can go and see what the literature says regarding that. So that's just kind of where I am with that in terms of the NAC. I think it's just as like any other supplement.
Right. Yeah, I think I have got most of my questions answered for sure. I have a little list here. And thanks so much. This was very, very enlightening.
Yeah, I think most of the glutathione that's sold on the market is already reduced. I just wanted to clarify that. There's not like a special bottle that says reduced glutathione. But that just basically means the form in which your body can use it the most, as opposed to what it is before.
Interesting.
Okay. You know what? Actually, I have a picture of that. I have a little cartoon here. Well, I had it. Oh, there it is. So the reduced, that would be the GSH, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the GSSG. Mm-hmm. Okay. Since I had it. Okay. Well, we're at about we're at an hour 4 minutes.
There was something I wanted to address.
Go for it.
I completely forgot. So beans, legumes, This has definitely been a big one in terms of nutrition. And actually, a lot of the research contradicts itself. There is a side that says that legumes should be fine. There's a side that says legumes are not fine. I think that this goes back to kind of what I was talking about before, which is like the literature is really trying to catch up to what people are experiencing. And I also think it has to do with the threshold level in which you are having that enzyme and how certain things interact. I will say, if you've ever had beans or soy or any of the things that were listed and you felt off or they don't agree with you, that's probably a telltale sign of you probably shouldn't ingest them. But I do think it's really important to know that like where we don't have G6PD, that enzyme to fight oxidative stress, we do have all of the other antioxidants and vitamins that we can get from our diet, right? And all of the other supplements that may or may not work for certain people, but I still think we do have ways that we can kind of combat this. So just knowing that, like, if you are feeling a little down or you're not feeling your greatest, like, that might not be the day to have like lentil soup if you've known that previously lentils are something that cause you to feel funny or that don't agree with you. So I think it's all about thinking about where you are, being mindful and understanding, like, am I in a good place? Do I feel a certain way? And I think what I would love is like research on thresholds for certain individuals and what that really looks like, right? Because that would be like amazing for us to be able to kind of have more. I know that people will say, well, you know, if you don't know, you should just avoid everything, because that's kind of the safe way to go. But I also want to say that we're also omitting other nutrients and sources of nutrients. And I think it really depends on your lifestyle. If you're a vegan and that's what you decide to do with your life, omitting beans would be pretty insane because you wouldn't be getting your protein. And so I think it's just kind of like finding what works for you. I would say if you do want to do some exploration, doing an elimination diet with a nutrition professional is a way to go. And that would be kind of like really planning out an elimination of certain, you know, foods for a long period of time. I think I said 5 to 7 weeks, really to see how you're feeling. And I think that's one of the ways to kind of see if something is changing. But yeah, I really think more research into glutathione, you know, that would be something that maybe we would take daily. Who knows if that would really change the game for G6PD deficient individuals. But I think there's a lot of research that we really need. And I think there's a lot of information that we need and that we don't have at this time to be able to make all of these questions succinct and concrete. But I'm just very proud and grateful to be here and have this opportunity. And thank you for the questions and thank you for listening.
Okay, well, Brianne, I think, yeah, me and the audience, we definitely appreciate you coming on and discussing this. So we're right at almost an hour and 10 minutes. Excuse me. And I think Niloufar asked a bunch of questions. Keely and Niloufar, do you all have anything else to say or add before we conclude?
Keely? I just want to thank Brianne. This is so useful. Like you said, we need much more research on G6PD because you can change G6PD is one of those amazing things that, and you know, my son calls it his superpower. And it is interesting because there are so many benefits and it is an evolutionary mutation. And you can lead a very healthy, happy lifestyle as long as you're watchful of triggers. But if you are not watchful, like during the neonatal stage or during your adult life, or you know, the rest of your life with triggers, the outcome can be drastic. I have seen people talk about their family passing away with the use of bad drugs, like methylene blue and things like that. And it's just heartbreaking to hear those stories. the neonatal situation as well is just heartbreaking to hear how this could impact children when as long as we're aware of the condition, you stay away from the triggers, you can live such a healthy lifestyle. I don't consider myself as immunocompromised, although some people do tag me as that. But I really think it's just awareness of it, and then research to understand how these people, how the population reacts, and what needs to be done for the population. So, Brianna, this was very, very enlightening for me, and I'm sure for a lot of folks as well. So thanks so much for doing this. And Anwar, you have been our champion from the start. So cannot thank you enough for bringing attention to G6PD. And of course, Keely is the stalwart. Like, there is hats off to Keely and everything that she's been doing for so long. Keely, you are our pillar of strength and hope.
Thank you, Niloufar. I never thought of myself that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, J Shine Randoms. I'm leaving this up. There's no reason to take it down. Nothing was said here that I think goes against community guidelines. So I'm gonna leave. If you guys have further questions, I'm gonna leave Brianne's email in the chat one more time.
I guess I should mention that our website is being updated with, we will have the lifestyle of G6PD Deficiency. I guess a healthy habit. I forget the exact title we have, but it's a nice thing to check up on, because Brianne is going to be the one orchestrating all the topics on there, as well as our blogs. So there's going to be a lot of things being said continuously on our website added. So
Yeah.
keep up and be updated.
And I'll say nutrition is definitely one of those areas where things change every day. I remember when people said don't eat an egg, and now it's like you need to eat an egg. So it's definitely one of those places where it takes continuous, really like reviewing of the research and changing the theories that you have before. But I'm really hoping that more research can be done with this population and wellness, because I think it's one of the only ways that at this point we can actually fight against oxidative stress, which is what is the end result of having less of the G6PD enzyme.
And also, just to add, we do have a Facebook page for the task force as well. So it's G6PD hash COVID-19 task force. And, if folks want to join that page, we do post emerging research that's coming up, as well as, these kind of videos that we are working with you on, and Keely. And we have, whenever Keely has something to say, we post it on our site as well. So that's another resource that people can use if required. Okay.
Brianne, I think one more refresher on what RDN stands for.
Oh, it stands for Registered Dietitian Nutritionist. And just so I give everybody a little bit of a difference, what's the difference between an RDN and then a nutritionist? I've had 6 years of schooling for nutrition, 4 years for my bachelor's, 2 years for my master's. I've done a 1,300-hour internship where I have shadowed dietitians and learned about disease states, and I've taken a national exam in order to get this distinction. So that means I did a whole lot of work to tell you to eat your greens.
And I am so grateful to have you on the foundation. So, thank you.
It is a little bit more than that, but I just like to have that joke, because sometimes I think about it and I'm like, yep, that's where we are.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank Extended Clips for the Cash App. Donations are always appreciated. And so with that, there's another comment for you, Rand.
Thank you.
Arms up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and conclude the stream. I want to thank everyone who watched and everyone who participated in the chat. And I want to thank Art Newstall TV for sharing to his community, and also BGS Ibmore for sharing to his community as well. And look out for more collaborations with the G6PD Deficiency Task Force and Foundation in the future. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. If you're watching this on the playback, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I and we will talk to you the next time. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right.
Bye.